The storm had swallowed the Montana mountains for 3 relentless days, turning the wilderness into a frozen, silent world. Ethan Miller, a former Army medic who had chosen solitude after years of service, stepped outside his small log cabin to check his traps before daylight faded again. The icy wind cut across his face like sharp blades, carrying with it the distant howl of the storm still brewing over the peaks. He took a careful step forward, boots sinking into the fresh snow. But before he could take another, something unusual caught his eye beneath a fallen pine tree. Ethan froze, breath hitching in his chest. Curled tightly under the thick branches was a small figure, fragile, unmoving, barely visible beneath layers of snow. As he moved closer, his heart dropped. It was a child. An Apache boy, no older than 8, trembling violently, cheeks pale, lips cracked, and eyes half open with exhaustion. Ethan knelt down, gently brushing snow from the boy's face. His skin was ice cold to the touch. Anyone else might have panicked, but Ethan's medical training surged forward, steady and instinctive, guiding every movement. He removed his own coat despite the biting wind and wrapped it around the child with practiced precision, sealing in whatever body heat he could. The boy's breath was shallow, each inhale a desperate attempt to cling to life. Ethan lifted him carefully, cradling him close to his chest, shielding him from the storm. He trudged back toward the log cabin, snow crunching beneath every step, the weight of the child feeling heavier not because of size, but because Ethan knew what hypothermia looked like and how close this boy was to losing the fight. Inside the warmth of the cabin, Ethan placed the child near the fireplace, stoking the flames higher. He moved quickly, boiling water, warming broth, laying out blankets, and rubbing the boy's cold hands to bring circulation back. He worked with a silent urgency, the same focused determination he'd once used on battlefields far away. Hours passed as he monitored the boy's breathing, checking his pulse, making sure his body temperature rose slowly. The storm raged outside, but inside, the battle for life continued with equal intensity. The next morning, the child stirred but didn't speak. His eyes fluttered open, dark and full of exhaustion yet carrying a quiet resilience. Ethan fed him small sips of warm soup, speaking softly, reassuring him even though he didn't know whether the boy understood English or had the strength to respond. Over the next 4 days, Ethan committed himself to the boy's recovery, watching over him through the long, icy nights, warming water for baths, tending frostbite wounds, and comforting him whenever he whimpered in pain or fear. The cabin had never felt so alive or so heavy with responsibility. As slowly, the child began to regain strength. On the 3rd night, as the fire crackled softly, the boy finally whispered his name, Toma. The single word was fragile, almost lost in the sound of the burning wood, but to Ethan, it was a victory. He smiled gently, introducing himself in return. As Toma's breathing steadied and his color returned, Ethan realized this child hadn't simply wandered off. No, the bruises, the frostbite, the desperate hunger, everything pointed to something more. Toma had been fighting for survival long before the storm trapped him beneath the tree. By the 4th day, the worst of the storm had passed. Sunlight streamed through the small window, casting warm patterns across the cabin floor. Ethan allowed himself a moment of peace, believing that the hardest part was behind them. He was wrong. Just as he poured warm oatmeal into a bowl for Toma, a sudden, thunderous knock rattled the wooden door. Ethan stiffened. No one ever traveled this deep into the wilderness, especially not during or after such a storm. He wasn't sure whether to feel fear, curiosity, or caution. But something told him that whatever waited outside was going to change everything. The 4th morning arrived gently, as if the mountains themselves were tired of fighting the storm. Sunlight spilled across the snow-covered valley, painting everything in gold and white. Inside the cabin, warmth finally returned, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt a sense of calm settling over the place. Toma, still weak but recovering, slept quietly near the fireplace. Ethan allowed himself a slow breath, believing they were finally past the worst. But peace in the wilderness never lasted long, and something in the stillness felt too perfect, too quiet, like the world was holding its breath. That uneasy silence shattered a moment later. Boom! 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 The sound slammed through the cabin walls, rattling dishes and jolting Ethan upright. His heart pounded instantly. No one ever came this far into the mountains, especially not after a deadly blizzard. Instinct sharpened his senses, years of military training waking inside him. He glanced at Toma, then at the door, unsure what danger waited outside. The knocks came again, heavy and desperate, as if whoever stood there had used the last of their strength to reach this place. Ethan steadied his breath and approached slowly. When he pulled open the door, icy wind rushed inside, but it wasn't the cold that froze him, it was the sight before him. 3 Apache women stood huddled in knee-deep snow, their traditional woven shawls soaked and heavy with frost. Their faces told a story of exhaustion, fear, and a long, painful journey through the storm. Snowflakes clung to their hair like frozen tears, and their breaths came in trembling gasps. Ethan immediately understood that no ordinary reason could have pushed them to survive such brutal weather. They were driven by something far greater. The woman in the center, older and with deep worry etched into her expression, took a small step forward. Her lips quivered from the cold, but her eyes held fierce determination. She clutched the edges of her shawl tightly, as if bracing herself to speak. When she finally found her voice, it cracked with emotion. "Please, we're looking for a child," she said, her English broken but clear enough to pierce the air. "Our little Toma." The name felt like a lightning strike. Behind her, the 2 younger women lowered their heads, grief and hope battling in their eyes. Ethan felt the world shift beneath him. Everything suddenly made sense, the bruises on Toma's arms, the fear in his eyes, the way he clung to Ethan during the storm. This wasn't just a lost child, this was a boy whose family had been searching for him with every last bit of strength they had left. Ethan stepped aside, gesturing for the women to enter the warmth of the cabin. The older woman hesitated, scanning his face, searching for an answer before he even spoke. Ethan's voice was gentle, steady, and full of understanding as he finally said, "He's here, he's safe." As the women entered and saw Toma lying near the fire, their expressions transformed, pain melting into overwhelming relief. Tears flowed freely as they rushed toward the boy, calling his name with trembling voices. Toma stirred weakly, eyes blinking open, confusion turning into recognition. Ethan watched silently, feeling a swell of emotion he hadn't expected. In that moment, he realized this wasn't the end of a rescue but the beginning of something far deeper. Their lives, his and Toma's, were now connected to this family, to their struggle, to their story. And whatever came next would change all of them forever.